Going to be hello be a brief but very fascinating, mind-boggling discussion about Hume's is versus ought principle, Hilbert's hotel, as well as Meinongian universes and omniverses. So regarding this question, I will begin by saying, well, who's David Hume? David Hume was a legendary early 19th, I believe, philosopher who really governed on natural empiricism, but also British idealism, and also the metaphysics of natural ontology, or pre-Kantian, even pre-Wittgensteinian ontology, as it pertains to, say, natural law, natural methods of epistemology being applied to discover the pragmatics of material empiricism or logical positivism, which is kind of the brutalization of logical facts into syntactic and semiotic kind of deductive logical common knowledge statements that we can all fundamentally access through kind of Kantian truth tables of acquired phenomenological perceptivism or perception. So beginning with the is versus ought principle, I will say that now it kind of governs what is possible in such an ontologically, metapistemologically, or epistemologically maximalist universe versus kind of the predestination or pre-possibilism of what should morally happen as kind of a moral, rigid designator law. So regarding this, I will say that if you take kind of the Alvin Putinga phenomenological theogonical perspectivism here, then it becomes clear that simply the modal rigid designator across all trans-world identities, across all possible worlds, may very well be a modal realist ontological argument for the existence of God. Now, if you want to continue with like an ethical, it's that simply the predominance of ethical law across all possible worlds predates the existence of a pre-existence entity, which causes a pre-existence, which then becomes subsistence or existence itself. Therefore, that could be God in a modal, moral, ontological, whether it's hyper-realist in a Baudrillard sense or a never-worldly sense, eternally. Now, regarding the philosophy of what it means of Hume's world is or ought principle to be applied to Meinongian possible worlds, well, it becomes very A.N. Whiteheadian, considering the pointillism of all cosmopsychic and cosmocentric entities across, say, the multiverse, omniverse, is simply just the universe. Now, regarding this question of why knowledge rather than knowledge doesn't exist in a panpsychic context, well, then we can quillscape or braid it simply in a Joycean argument that panpsychism is phenomenological game theory extrapolated n number of times in order to produce the first fine-tuned modules of hyperconsciousness, proto-consciousness, or simply median ordinate consciousness itself. So, regarding David Hume's kind of principle of is or ought, what should happen versus what can happen modally within the kind of a maximalist construct, not necessarily epistemic constructivist, but still possibilistic context, then it follows that what is or ought is and still may apply even with trans-world identity rigid designation, even in Meinongian worlds, because Meinongianism, contrary to this kind of a false, often misperception, is that Meinongianism precludes absolute impossibility, but I am kind of the arbiter or harbinger of belief that it is possible according to varying physiologic degrees of possibilism and impossibilism and possibilism and impossible possibilism. So I hope this conversation meets you well, and that learning about Hume's is or ought principle teaches you not only about the atomic mirror topologies of all possible geometries across all possible worlds, but also what Chauvin, Putinga, modal Morgan God or goddess if you want now, or even deities, children, offspring, if you could, like a Rastafarian or simply an Aesopian fabulistic sense. Now, continuing to deduct this, I will say that the Meinongian transworld identity doesn't preclude of impossibility of moral necessarily as necessitarianism, simply because the preexistence of necessitarianism itself. So, I will conclude by saying, take what you want and take what you will, but I think that Hume's is or ought principle is a powerful illustration of the omniversal semantic or Platonic, Aristotelian, Hypatian, whatever space. You can insert kind of Euler, Gauss, or whomever into there, and it simply becomes an illustration, or even Sir-Pisney's triangle, of spaces, which is what is possible versus what should be possible according to the kind of modal necessity of a morally incorrigible, rigid designator ontological status across the possible outside Archimedes God, Basionistically and Bomistically. So have a wonderful, wonderful day.